Today we're going to be building a lifting system to allow me to quickly and easily remove and reinstall the rooftop tent from my four-wheel drive and store it safely.
You know when you do something and it just actually works how you thought it would? It doesn't always happen, but it's nice when it does.
So why am I doing this? Well, I've been running the rooftop tent for 3 years, and in that time it has not been off the car. We bolted it on and I never took it off again. Now it's been fantastic for camping and touring, and I honestly don't think I could go back to the swag. But now that I've been using the car for more general day-to-day driving, towing trailers around, working on the house and all that sort of thing, some of the minor inconveniences of having a rooftop tent on the car have shown themselves. Now, undercover car parks obviously aren't a thing for this anymore, and more importantly, I can't even make it into my shed. So in order to make this setup worthwhile, obviously it has to be easy to remove and install the rooftop tent before we go away for a weekend or that sort of thing. So let's get into it and we'll have a look at how we're actually going to make this setup work. So you'll have to excuse my fantastic engineering drawings on the whiteboard over here, but this is the basic plan. I want to be able to back the car straight under the rooftop lifter. I don't want any hassles in hooking up lots of slings or chains and trying to balance things. It has to be easy and simple to use. So we back the car straight under, drop the rooftop lifter down, hook the chains up to 4 of the 8 legs on the roof rack, undo the clamps on the roof rack, and lift the whole setup straight off the top of the car.
So in today's episode, we're pretty obviously not in the shed. That's because we're going to be working in my garage today. Now, the reason you guys haven't seen this in the past is because, to be honest, there's not a whole lot going on in here. It's just storage. Unlike the shed, which is set up as all workshop, it's just to store cars in and that sort of thing. Now, the first thing you may have noticed is that unlike a shed, in here we have a lined ceiling. Now, that unfortunately means there's not just big steel beams that I can pick up off to hang the rooftop or the lifting system off. But the positive is that it is a pitched roof, so above that lined ceiling there is a fair bit of roof space. So my plan is to actually build most of the lifting system into the roof, meaning that I'll be able to get the rooftop nearly up against the ceiling. So before I go into designing the actual lifting system and how I'm going to mount that into the ceiling, the real question is, what are we using to do the actual lifting work? Now for that I have 2 of these. These are an electric hoist. They're pretty much like a winch, except they're actually rated as a lifting device. Unlike ratchet straps, these are actually meant for lifting. So you can use these in workshops off like little mini gantry cranes and all that sort of thing. They've got a couple of models of these, but I went the lighter ones, which are 125 to 250 kilos. Now that means that with a single cable down, you can run 125 kilos off it. With a double or a looped cable, you can run 250. Now, I'm thinking I'm gonna run it single drop because I've got 2 of these. So I'm gonna run one at the rear edge of the rooftop tent and one at the front. That's just so you can sort of control them separately, because these things never wanna lift off evenly, especially depending on where I've got weight sitting and that sort of thing. So it's gonna be nice to have the control, but with 2 of them, obviously that ends up being 250 kilos combined lifting capacity between them, which I would hope that nothing up there weighs that much. With everything I've got on the rooftop, it's roughly around 100 kilos. So we are well within a safety factor of what we can lift there. So the first step of sorting out this system is going to be to get up into the roof cavity above the garage, and we're going to work out how we're actually going to mount this system. Now, how I'm going to actually do this is to run timbers like this across between these 2 pieces of timber in each truss. I'm going to run it through about 5 of the trusses. So what I'm going to do, cut the ends down so that they sit nicely in here, nail that into each of these bits of timber in the truss. Now that's pretty much how the trusses are all held together anyway, so I figured I'd just follow suit with that. So 5 of these timbers across, 1 beam to run through the middle here, and we should be good to hold the weight.
By placing the timber supports between the trusses, I'm not relying on these nail plates to do any of the actual heavy lifting. They're just there to hold the timbers in place.
So that's all the timber supports installed into the roof of the garage. Now the next step is going to be to put a piece of 40 by 40 mil SHS or steel tube through the roof across the top of all those timbers. Now I've gone 40 by 40 because A, I know it'll be strong enough, and B, the brackets that come with those king chrome winches or hoists are just over 40 mil, they're about 45 mil. So I know if I get some 40 by 40 mil tube, it's going to be strong enough to support the weight, and I can just use the factory brackets rather than having to drill plates or anything like that. So I've got the nav ready to go, and we're going to head out and grab some steel. So I've just been out and picked up the steel we need for this job, and we're back in the fabrication bay to get this sorted out. Now I picked up 2.4 meters, but I actually only need 2320. So I'm just going to trim that down with the cold saw, and then I'm just going to drill some holes in this steel. Now what I'm going to do is drill a hole for 1 screw into each piece of timber in the roof. So I've measured the position of each of those timbers. I'm going to pre-drill it now so I don't have to do it when I'm in the roof, so that I can just put a screw into each bit of timber, and that'll stop the steel wanting to move at all once it's got the weight of the cranes hanging off it. Obviously the last thing we want is anything moving around up in the ceiling while we're trying to lift the rooftop off the car down below. So that's this bit of steel, cut, pre-drilled, deburred and ready to go in the roof. For anyone that's interested, it is 40 by 40 3mm wall tube, so it should be plenty strong enough for anything we're going to hang off this. So with the steel support secured into the roof, the next step is going to be to actually mount the 2 hoists up there. Now this is going to be pretty straightforward, as these come with a saddle type clamp and bolts and everything to secure to the top plate here. There's already threads drilled in there, so there's 2 of these clamps, they just bolt over the top. So I should be able to get these into the roof, drop that over the top of the piece of tube I put in there, chuck the bolts in, we're good to go. And then I've got to cut a couple of holes in the ceiling and see if this pendant reaches the ground.
This lifting system is going to incorporate a spreader bar, so to allow the chains to rise into the ceiling, I've had to cut a long slot in the plaster.
So now I've got the hoists mounted into the roof cavity above the garage, and I've cut the holes through the plaster for the hoist to drop through. Next up, I'm going to make a couple of spreader bars just to separate the chains that drop down off the hoists. Now I'm only using 20mm by 20mm SHS or steel tube for these. That's because they don't have to actually carry any weight. All they're doing is keeping the chains separated so that I can easily attach them to the outer edges of the rooftop tent. So we're going to cut these down, drill a couple of holes in them for some eye bolts, and get these things hung up off the hoists.
Having everything in the fabrication bay all set up and ready to go really makes projects like this super easy and streamlined.
So with the spreader bars cut and drilled, I've just put a quick coat of paint on them, and while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to cut up the chains and talk through how we're going to actually set this up for lifting. So for a start, I've gone with some eye bolts. Now I'm going to run these, one on the top of each lifting bar at each end, and one on the bottom of the lifting bar. And the easiest way I came up with to do this was to get, these are both 8mm female threaded eye bolts and 8mm male threaded eye bolts. So I'll cut that down to suit the thickness of the bar I've got, and I'll be able to literally bolt these straight through the bar. And I've just got some chain. So this is rated to 190 kilos, that's its safe working load, and we're going to have 4 of those dropping from the winches. So it's going to be way too strong for what it's actually lifting, but the only reason I went with a bigger size chain was just to get the links physically big enough to put a decent sized D-shackle through and make it nice and easy to work with. And it is still small enough that it's going to have no dramas fitting through the holes in the ceiling or anything like that. So I'm going to cut this chain down and get these eye bolts ready to go. By then the paint should be dry and we'll be ready to assemble these things. So now I've got the hoist hanging through the holes I cut in the ceiling, and I've decided to double the cable over. Now the reason I've decided to double it over isn't for weight carrying. As I said earlier, it's 125 kilos in a single line, it's now 250. It's just for speed. So the winches move fairly fast, which is obviously great if you're going the full length to the ground and the full length to the roof. I more so want the control when I'm going to put it down on the car. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit fiddly in lining up the brackets and that sort of thing. So I want to have that control and it not be too fast in the way it lowers. So by doubling the cable over, we obviously get half the speed. Now, this also means that it will be able to go slightly higher into the ceiling, which is great for me because obviously any height that I can get it up further is close that I can get the rooftop tent to the ceiling. But that means because it's going slightly higher that the chains are going to clash with the edges of my slot I've cut in the ceiling here. So I'm just going to have to cut those out a little bit further, which I thought I may have to do, but I figured I may as well keep the holes in the ceiling as small as possible. So we'll just trim those out about 100mm further at each end and we should be sweet. So I've now got the bar with the eye bolts on it set and ready to go. Now that is as high as it goes. These hoists do have a limit switch, so when they get to their maximum height, they cut out, which is good. So you can't wind the hook up into the hoist basically. And as you can probably see, the chains aren't hitting the plaster, so I've sort of accounted for that. So if we come down, it's nice and easy. Same on the way back up into the ceiling, and it caps out. Now, you'll also see that I've got the pendant hanging down and the power lead just hanging down. That's not gonna stay like that. I'm gonna get the power points wired up in the roof for them to plug into, so there won't be an extension lead running up to the roof. And the pendants, I think I'll just put another hole and drop them down just further over so they're against the wall. With that one all sorted out, we're ready to do the next one. Now the next one should be easy, as I know I can just set up everything exactly the same. So the next step is gonna be to actually test the hoist. Now, probably don't need to do this, but I figured it'll be a good step to just see if anything moves. I'm very confident that nothing will, but I figured I may as well try it with some weights before I go lifting the actual rooftop tent off the car. So let's give this thing a go. Just like that. Makes it look easy. That's 50 kilos right there, total. And the thing doesn't even strain. That's great. So I'm gonna get up in the roof and just make sure that everything's secure up there. As I said, fairly confident, but I've taken some measurements just to make sure nothing moves. Then once I'm happy with this, we'll move on to actually lifting the rooftop tent. So before we back the GQ onto this thing, to see how well it actually works, I'm just gonna trim around the edges of the 2 holes in the roof with some aluminium channel. Now this is gonna serve 2 purposes. One, it's going to stop the chain from hitting the edge and tearing big chunks out of it. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys have dealt with plaster, but it's pretty soft, especially once you've got a raw edge like that. And 2, which kind of flows on from that, is it's just gonna look neater. I've also got up in the roof and just run some timbers between the 2 trusses where I've cut the big holes in the roof, as obviously I've taken a lot of strength out of the plaster and I don't want the plaster itself to start cracking. So now we're just gonna trim off the edges, then we should be good to test it. So I've got the aluminium trim all cut and installed into the holes in the roof, and it's came up looking really nice. Definitely a lot better than just raw plaster. And now I've backed the GQ in under the holes in the roof and I've lined it up with the spreader bars for the rooftop tent lifter. It lines up really well, which I'm happy with. So now I've just got to cut some chains to suit, and I'm also going to sleeve these chains with this, which is just some clear vinyl tube, just so that there's no chance of the chains scratching the rooftop tent or the roof when I feed them through under the rooftop tent. Now with the chains cut and sleeved, ready to hook these up to the rooftop tent, and we're nearly ready to lift it.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit nervous to see how this all went lifting the rooftop tent, but all the preparation was done and there's only one way to find out how it goes.
So we've got the rooftop all hooked up to the hoist, and I've also undone the wiring loom and all the clamps around the car. This thing is ready to lift off, so I guess that's the moment of truth. Let's see how it goes. There we have it. Whoa.
That actually works so well.
Yeah, so smooth.
Plenty of clearance.
Yeah, there's heaps of room. Now it's just a straight run through underneath it. It's like it's not even there. It actually doesn't look out of place. If you were walking around, you'd completely forget that's there. I am gonna hook up some safety chains to it, just for when I'm leaving it up there long term, so that it's not hanging off the winches. Like, I mean, they are a rated lifting device. They're a proper hoist. They're not like a car winch. They are actually meant for lifting. But still, I might just put some safety chains under it, just in case. You know, if I'm gonna leave it up there for a month or something, you might be working on a car underneath it or whatever, just in case. Yeah, but mate, as far as lifting and lowering, it's so smooth. Literally push of a button. Certainly a lot easier than multiple ratchet straps and D-shackles. Now I'm going to move the patrol out and I'm going to show you how I can lower this all the way down to the ground. So if I want to do any work, you know, maybe fit a different awning or change the lights or anything like that, I can drop this thing down to the ground, make it super easy to work on. Just like that, smooth.
How good is
That, I don't think a rooftop has ever been that easy to work on,
No.
ever. Like, oh, I want to do something with the solar panels. They're right there. Not sketchy slings and forklifts and questionable swinging activities. Just drop it down on the ground, do whatever I need to do, and lift it back up, drop it on the car again. That's so easy. The other thing I thought too is, like, if for whatever reason I didn't want to leave it hanging there, I can still use that to lift it off and then drop it on a trailer or a ute or whatever and just, you know, drive it out. You could sleep in it right here.
the spare bed?
This is the spare bed, yeah. That's like a fold down mattress. Just drop the rooftop down, open it up. There you go.
You know when you do something and it just actually works how you thought it would? It doesn't always happen, but it's nice when it does.
And that is the rooftop tent hoist all done. Now, I am stoked with how well this thing works. It's super easy to operate, super easy to use, which, as I'm sure you guys understand, if it's not easy to use, you're just not going to use it. So this will make sure that I take the tent off when I'm not needing it, and if we're going away for the weekend, it's super easy to chuck on. Like, by myself, I reckon 15 minutes, tent's on, and we're good to go. So let us know what you guys thought about this in the comments, and if you've done anything like this in your own shed or at your own place, let us know. I'm keen to see some other people's ideas. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, get subscribed, and also we've got merch up on the store, so head over to aussiearvos.com.au and grab yourself some. We'll see you guys in the next episode.